This is presentation 4 of the 2013 ELA Assessment Scoring Series. In this presentation, we're going to be looking at the 2-point guide set and practice sets for the short response questions. You will need a copy of the 2-point rubric, the 2-point guide set, and the 2-point practice set. If you need copies, they can be downloaded from e2ela.wikispaces.com/scoring. The responses we'll examine today are all from Grade 4 questions, but the 2-point rubric is applied identically for all of the ELA Grade 3 through Grade 8 assessments. Please pause the video and take a few minutes to read the passage in the guide set called "Why Evergreen Trees Never Lose Their Leaves." Students were asked to respond to the following question. What is the theme of the myth, why the evergreen trees never lose their leaves? Use 2 details from the myth to support your answer. Write your answer in complete sentences. When we introduced the rubrics, we observed that while the rubric tells us what the different score points look like, the guide papers show us how they look. Now we're going to take a look at several guide papers that are examples of student work to exemplify the different score levels. This is guide paper 1. Here's the student response. The theme of that myth is, if you're kind-hearted and nice, you will be rewarded. If you're not nice, you will get a punishment or no reward. The wind asked if it could touch every leaf in the world, but the forest king said no, only the trees that have been nice don't lose their leaves. In the text, it says the kind spruce tree, so that tells you that the tree is kind-hearted. The student received a score point of 2 for this response. The response makes a valid inference from the text to identify the theme of the myth. The theme of the myth is that if you're kind-hearted and nice, you will be rewarded. If you're not nice, you will get a punishment or no reward. The student also provided a sufficient number of concrete details from the text to support as required by the prompt. The wind asked if you could touch every leaf in the world, and in the text it says the spruce tree is kind, so that tells you that the tree is kind-hearted. The response was in complete sentences where errors don't impact the readability. So in summary, it's a score point of 2. The student made a valid inference and provided a sufficient number of facts to answer the question. This is guide paper 2. The theme of the myth is that if you keep trying, something good will help you, because when the little bird broke its wing and asked 3 trees to help them, they rejected the little bird. Also, when the little bird asked 3 other trees, they helped the little bird. Guide paper 2 also received a score point of 2. In this, the response makes a valid inference from the text to identify the theme of the myth. The student wrote, "The theme of the myth is that if you keep trying, something good will help you." The student also provided a sufficient number of concrete details from the text as support as required by the prompt. When the little bird broke its wing and asked 3 trees to help them, they rejected the little bird. That's 1. And then the other is also when the little bird asked 3 other trees, they helped the little bird. So the reason they got a 2, again, is they identified the theme and they provided 2 facts. Here's guide paper 3. This is the first of the 1-point guide papers. The student responded, "The theme of the myth is about a tree and how it helps the bird. The spruce tree let the bird stay on her branches, and the other trees began to help the bird, and those trees got to keep their leaves." Guide paper 3 received a score point of 1. Remember, the prompt asked for a theme, and the student responded with a mostly literal recounting of the events of the text. The theme of the myth is about a tree and how it helps the bird. It's not really the theme, that's more of a retell. The response did provide 2 details from the text. The spruce tree let the little bird stay on her branches, and the other trees began to help the bird, and those trees got to keep their leaves. The student responded in complete sentences where the errors didn't impact the readability at all. Holistically, the score receives a score point of 1 by giving only some relevant information and no valid claim. The difference between this and the score point 2 papers is that in this case there was no valid inference or claim. The student seems to have a rather shaky grasp of the theme. It's mostly a literal retell, although the student does provide 2 details. This is scored as a 1. Now we're going to take a look at guide paper 4. The student wrote, "The theme of this myth is that if you help someone, good things will come to you, and that you will feel good inside." Guide paper 4 received a 1. The student did make a valid inference from the text to identify the theme of the myth. The student wrote, "The theme of the myth is that if you help someone, good things will come to you, and you will feel good inside." The student's response did not provide any details from the text to support the inference, however, so this remains a 1. Now, in the previous one, the student provided the details but no inference. In this one, the student provided inference but no details. In both cases, the student gets a 1. Guide paper 5 is the first of the 0 score points. In this one, the student wrote, "The evergreen tree's leaves are always green in the spring, summer, fall, and winter. That's why its name is evergreen. The evergreen tree do lose their leaves, but not all at the same time." This received a score point of 0. The response doesn't address any of the requirements of the prompt. There's no inference, and there are no facts from the reading. The final guide paper is guide paper 6. This is also a guide paper for a 0. Here's what the student wrote. "The wind blows the leaves off of the trees with cold breeze, but if you have wax on your leaves and leaves like needles, then your tree can live all winter." The student received a score point of 0 for this. The response does not address any of the requirements of the prompt. There's no reference to the theme of the story, and while the fact may be true, that's outside information. It does not come from the text. At this point, we're going to take a look at the practice set. There are another 5 questions in this practice set. We'd like you to pause, read all 5 of those questions, and score them. We'll go over the scores when you return. In practice paper 1, the student wrote, "The theme to why the evergreen trees never lose their leaves is helping, because when the little bird broke its wing, the evergreens helped it. The other theme to why the evergreen trees never lose their leaves is that if you don't help someone, you're going to regret it." Practice paper 1 was scored as a 1. The student made some valid inferences from the text to identify some themes. The student identified helping, and then if you don't help, you're going to regret it. But there's only one concrete detail included from the text. The student said when the little bird broke its wing, the evergreens helped it. So there's the one detail. The student has a theme, actually 2 themes, but the prompt requires 2 details and 1 theme. In this case, this response is scored as a 1. Here's practice paper 2. The idea of the myth is that if you are nice, good things happen. The evergreens protected the bird and got to keep their leaves. The oak, the birch, and the willow were mean to the bird, so their leaves fell off. Practice paper 2 was scored as a 2. The student makes a valid inference from the text to identify the theme. The student said the idea of the myth is that if you are nice, good things happen. The student also provided a sufficient number of concrete details from the text for support as required by the prompt. The student said the evergreens protected the bird and got to keep their leaves. That's 1. Then the oak, birch, and willow were mean to the bird, so their leaves fell off. That's 2. The response included complete sentences where errors didn't impact the readability of the response at all. Again, the response is scored as a 2. The student correctly identified a theme and provided sufficient evidence to support that theme. Here's practice paper 3. The student wrote, "The theme of the book is to tell you a little bit about trees in the forest and differences of trees. Evergreen trees never lose their leaves because they have wax on their leaves and they have cone-shaped things to keep seeds. Practice paper 3 was scored as a 0. The response doesn't address any of the requirements of the prompt. The only information the student added was from outside of the passage, so consequently the student didn't meet any of the requirements of the prompt. No theme, no concrete details. Here's practice paper 4. The student wrote, "The theme of the myth is kindness. The spruce tree let the little bird with a broken wing live on its thick leaves all winter long. The pine tree said it would help it keep warm by blocking the cold wind from the bird freeze. And the juniper tree let it eat its yummy berries all cold winter long." Practice paper 4 was scored as a 2. The student made a valid inference from the text. The student identified the theme as being kindness, and the student provided a sufficient number of concrete details from the text as the prompt requires. The spruce tree let the little bird with a broken wing live on its thick leaves all winter long, and the pine tree said it would help it keep warm by blocking cold wind from the bird freeze. So the sentences are complete, and while one of them was a little bit clumsy, it really didn't impact the readability. So the student receives a score point of 2 for this one. Here's the last practice paper. This is practice paper 5. The student wrote, "The theme of the story is a little bird that broke its wing and can't fly with his friends, so it has to find a tree that will help him live in it till spring." Practice paper 5 is scored as a 1. It's a mostly literal retelling of the details from the story. There's no theme identified in it, but the response does include complete sentences where errors do not impact the readability.